皆さんこんばんは。金曜日の夜にたくさんお集まりいただきまして、多大の関心をお持ちいただいているのか、お暇があったのか、その両方であっても一切構いませんが、来ていただいて、心から感謝申し上げます。本日はご案内の通り、国際連合教育科学文化機関、ユネスコという名前での方が知られていますが、のイリーナ・ボコバ事務局長をお迎えし、ユネスコのソフトパワーアジェンダ、持続可能な繁栄と平和に向けた連携をテーマにご講演をいただきます。ボコバ事務局長は大変お忙しい日程の中で、こういう時間を取っていただきました。つい先ほどまで総理とお会いになっていただいていますし、そういった時間をというか、こういう場を設定していただいたことに、同友会を代表して、まずもって心から御礼を申し上げたいと思います。ユネスコは国際平和と人類の福祉の促進を目的とした国際連合の専門機関であり、本部はパリに置かれ、地域事務所は世界55カ所に広がっております。万人のための教育、文化の多様性の保護等を活動の目標に掲げており、教育の分野ではさまざまな国際機関と協力しながら、世界中のすべての人々に教育の機会が与えられるよう取り組んでおります。また、文化の分野では人類共通の貴重な財産であります遺跡、建造物、自然を世界遺産として認定し、国際的に守っていく取り組みを行っておられることは、皆さんご承知のとおりであります。このユネスコの世界遺産保護活動は大変知名度が高く、日本ではすでに18件が登録されております。昨年の富士山の世界文化遺産登録に続いて、本年6月には群馬県の富岡製糸場と絹産業遺産群が世界遺産として登録されました。いずれの遺産にもそれを契機に大勢の観光客が訪れ、大きな経済効果をもたらしていることもご承知の通りであります。また、無形文化遺産も昨年登録されました食をはじめ22件が登録されておりますが、今年は和紙が登録される見通しであるというふうに聞いております。正式には11月24日から始まりますユネスコ本部における政府間会合で決定の運びということでありますが、すでに登録の勧告を受けておりますので、正式決定は間違いないと思いますが、事務局長にもぜひ改めてお願いをしておきたいと思います。日本はユネスコの意思決定プロセスに積極的に参画をしており、ボコバ様がユネスコの事務局長を務められる前は、日本人の松浦浩一郎氏が1999年から2009年まで、日本人として初めてのみならず、アジアからの初めての選出としての事務局長を務めておられましたが、この点については日本としても大変名誉だというふうに思っております。本日はボコバ氏よりユネスコの今後に向けた取り組みや課題、官民連携の在り方について約30分の予定でお話をいただいた後、ご質問をお受けいただける点になっております。ただ、一言だけ私が打足で付け加えておりますと、控え室で、ボコバ事務局長以下の方とお話をしておりますときに、ただいまユネスコは大変な資金不足に陥っているという話がございました。これはいつにかかってアメリカがですね、ユネスコへの、資金の支払いを今サスペンドしておるという状況だそうでございますが、これは裏に政治的な事情があるにしてもですね、そのことが大きな資金難の一つの要因になっておる。一方で、ユネスコといたしましては、少しでも活動資金を得るために、企業とのパートナーシップという形でのですね、活動を今推進しておられて、日本でもパナソニックさんでありますとか、あるいはANA さんでありますとか、NHK さんとか、そういうところがパートナーシップをすでに組んでおられるそうでありますが、この機会にもしご関心の向きがあればですね、 ぜひ特命全権大使もおられますので、お話をまたしていただければ幸いと思います。このぐらいで私の冒頭の挨拶は終わりにいたしまして、早速、じゃあ、BOKOVA事務局長の方からのお話を伺いたしたいと思います。それでは恐れ入りますが、Would you please come up to the podium and start? Thank you very much. Now the microphone is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kagisawa, Chairman of KZ Doyukai. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost, thank you for this invitation and thank you for coming on a Friday evening. Indeed, I appreciate it very, very much. And I'm deeply honored by this opportunity to speak to Keizai Doyukai and immediately to say that I'm here for the 4th time in Japan. We have great friends. We have a big network of supporters in different universities, site managers. As you said, I was very privileged just to meet the Prime Minister, to exchange with him ideas about the future of our cooperation. And of course, further on, I will speak about my main visit, my main objective of visiting here, the extremely important World Conference on Education for Sustainable Development that is opening in 2 days in Nagoya. And of course, let me say that it is the first time that I'm meeting with the Japan Association of Corporate Executives that was founded almost 70 years ago. I would say we have the same age. UNESCO also is celebrating 70th anniversary. I believe that as a private, non-profit and non-partisan organization of committed business leaders, you're sharing the same values like UNESCO, the values of sustainable development, the values of human dignity, the values of peace. And since your inception, your organization has assumed a leading position in supporting efforts to strengthen the economy and I would say the well-being of the Japanese society. I have heard that from 83 members in 46, your organization now counts more than 1,300 top executives, all committed to shaping corporate paths for inclusive and sustainable growth. And I believe the title of my lecture today, which is UNESCO Soft Power Agenda, Partnerships for Sustainable Development and Peace, is also in many ways coinciding with your approach as a form of Keizai Doyukai's form of soft power. I refer here to the concept as explored by Joseph Nye, the rector, the chancellor of the Harvard University, Kennedy School of Government, when he said that soft power extends beyond purely government action to build more effective ways to advance public goods. And it refers to the power to broker ideas, to define problems, to set agendas by bringing all relevant actors together for joint goals. It is the power to draw on the wealth of civil society also and the engagement of local communities and NGOs. And it is the power also to craft partnerships with the private sector to foster more effective collective action. I'm convinced, ladies and gentlemen, that we need precisely such forms of soft power to respond to the challenges of the 21st century. While globalization is accelerating, we see also the same with the impact of climate change and natural disasters. The Great East Japan tsunami and earthquake that struck Japan on 11th March 2011 reminded the world of the vulnerabilities all societies share. There has been tremendous growth across the world, but inequalities are increasing. Technologies are changing the way we communicate, we learn and we behave, but societies are more vulnerable, while more connected than ever. Information has never been so available, but the knowledge gap is widening. The world is younger than ever. Human rights aspirations are high, but so are thwarted expectations and challenges. The opportunities for peace are strong, but conflict has moved within countries, and culture sometimes is on the front line. Throughout the world, we see tremendous progress. Millions are being lifted out of poverty thanks to the great humanist agenda of the Millennium Development Goals that was adopted in the year 2000. And now the United Nations are crafting a new global agenda to follow, agenda for sustainability beyond 2015. But the challenges remain steep of exclusion, poverty and disease, and new ones are emerging. These are raising difficult new questions we must address about the meaning of progress, about how we can build the future we want for all. I take this notion from the 2012 United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development, whose outcome document was entitled The Future We Want. For decades, development was measured first and foremost with economic factors. Human development then began to be assessed with wider indicators, including life expectancy, educational attainment, and security. And we at the United Nations started publishing since a few years ago the Human Development Reports. I mention this because I know that the last report was presented by my colleague, the Executive Director of the United Nations Development Program here in Japan, jointly with the Prime Minister, a report that we at UNESCO also are contributing. And today I'm convinced we need new thinking again. This is especially important as countries accelerate to reach the Millennium Development Goals by the year 2015, and as governments shape a new global sustainable development agenda to follow. This calls for new policy mix, new ways of thinking. States cannot tackle challenges alone, nor can international organizations. To craft solutions that are inclusive, sustainable, and just, we need to draw on all sources of knowledge, all sources of experience, all sources of innovation and commitment. We need to cross policy boundaries and connect the dots across the board. This is essential to generate public goods every society needs today: quality education for all, access to the power of sciences, respect for cultural heritage and diversity, flourishing freedom of expression. Sustainability has deeper roots than economic assets. It must start with enhancing the rights and dignity of every woman and man. This is UNESCO's message, and it has been at the heart of our mandate since 1945. Our Constitution opens with the words, "I never tire in repeating." Since wars begin in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. For me, this is the essence of the soft power agenda. Written after the devastation of World War II, the Constitution reflected the conviction that peace had to be built in new ways. In its words, peace must be founded, if it is not to fail, upon the intellectual and moral solidarity of mankind. In the turmoil of reconstruction, these words pointed to humanity's potential to rebuild on new foundations through the strength of solidarity. And I believe these ideas have deep roots in Japan. In fact, the world's first UNESCO club was created here in July 1947 in Sendai, which I visited after the tsunami hit Tohoku Prefecture, where I went with my predecessor, a respected friend Mr. Koichiro Matsuura. And I believe this paved, at that time, the way for Japan to join UNESCO in 1951, 5 years before its formal admission to the United Nations. And since then, Japan has always been a great champion for UNESCO in its action in education, culture, the sciences, and communication. These are global goals affecting rich and poor countries alike, essential for governments, civil society, and the business sector. I know this idea has strong echoes in Japan. This September, in his speech to the 69th session of the General Assembly of the United Nations, Prime Minister Abe underlined the importance of the private sector in Japanese policy for advancing collective goods, such and including gender equality. In his words, Japan has now begun to work towards resolving the numerous issues we face together with private industries to increase women's participation in society as soon as possible. I believe the Japanese private sector understands intimately the notion of corporate social responsibility, grasping the clear social, economic, and business benefits that arise from such engagement. This is why UNESCO's cooperation with Japanese private sector companies is so trending-setting and innovative. Let me give you just a few examples. Just 2 days ago, in fact it was yesterday, we arrived with the All Nippon Airways ANA flight that carried a UNESCO logo. It was a very moving example to fly on the first airplane with ANA airplane where it was written ANA supports UNESCO. I think this boosts not only our morale at UNESCO, but it's a strong message to the world that what we do matters. It matters for Japan, but it matters also for the world. And this builds on an agreement that we signed in September last year, 2013, between UNESCO, ANA, and the National Federation of UNESCO Associations in Japan. I would say the strongest association in the world that UNESCO supports. It is an agreement for the period of 3 years, through which support will be provided to UNESCO's action, including, for instance, safeguarding World Heritage in Myanmar, a country in transition that needs so much of our support and our engagement. UNESCO has long-standing cooperation with Panasonic, with a focus on promoting World Heritage and sustainable development through a global communication campaign and by supporting educational activities around World Heritage preservation. We work together to raise awareness about sustainable development across the world, with a focus on young girls and boys through the Eco-Learning program, acting through television and press to reach the wider public. This includes, for instance, Panasonic's sponsorship of the World Heritage Special, aired on the National Geographic Channel in 183 countries, with a huge impact all over the world. The United Nations General Assembly declared 2014-2024 the United Nations Decade on Sustainable Energy for All. In this context, Panasonic and UNESCO are partnering to provide solar and electrification to rural schools in Benin, Madagascar, Mauritania, Niger, and Togo to improve the quality teaching and learning in sustainable ways. Our partnerships include also NHK, the Japan Broadcasting Corporation, with which we are working to develop documentaries about World Heritage sites across the world as educational resources and outreach material to strengthen action to safeguard humanity's shared heritage. There are other examples of partnerships for innovation beyond Japan. In 2011, I launched the Global Partnership for Girls and Women's Education at headquarters in Paris, with the then United States Secretary of State, Hillary Rodham Clinton, and United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, to target the weak links of girls' secondary education and women's literacy by joining forces with major private sector companies. The stakes are very high, ladies and gentlemen. Only 38% of countries have reached gender parity at secondary level, while the poorest girls are not expected to complete primary education before 2086. With a big multinational company like Procter & Gamble, we are supporting girls and women's literacy in Senegal and launching a new program to reach more than 60,000 illiterate girls and women in Nigeria. And we know how important nowadays the question about girls' education becomes in Nigeria, where we have seen the advancement of extremism and abduction of girls in the northern provinces. With the Packard Foundation, we are targeting girls' dropout rates in secondary schools in Ethiopia and Tanzania. With Nokia, we are strengthening learning through the use of mobile technologies. With the GEMS Education, a foundation working from Dubai, we are working in Lesotho and Kenya to enhance teacher training and gender equality, with a focus on science, mathematics, and technology education. We are working with the St. James Foundation also to strengthen the quality of school principals in Ghana and Kenya as key actors in the learning process. Last March, UNESCO launched the Business Backs Education Global Campaign with GEMS Education to challenge the private sector to double its corporate social responsibility spending on education by March 2015 to reach $1 billion US. This was the goal of the Business Backs Education Summit, where I participated also with the Mayor of London last month. Each of these initiatives seek to multiply the power of gender equality and girls' education and women literacy. Recognition is another multiplier. We must keep girls in school, and we must inspire them to lead by showing them what can be done. Take science, for example, where women represent only 29% of researchers globally. For over 15 years, UNESCO is partnering with L'Oréal to promote women in science, to support thousands of young women researchers across the world. The winners of the 2008 UNESCO L'Oréal Women in Science Award received the Nobel Prize 1 year later. The Israeli scientist Ada Yonath for chemistry and the American scientist Elizabeth Blackburn for medicine. And we have, of course, Professor Kuroda from Japan that received the UNESCO L'Oréal Prize 2 years ago. And allow me to give one last example. On 23rd September, we launched Myanmar's first Center for Excellence for Business Skills Development to improve the skills and employability of young women and men. This is the result of cooperation between UNESCO, PepsiCo, and the Myanmar Ministry of Education, the first public-private partnership of its kind in this country, a country in transition. On the basis of this experience, I wish to highlight 4 points to build stronger private-public partnerships. The first concerns the importance of common values and objectives as the foundation for partnership, namely universal human rights and the principles of the United Nations Global Compact. We need to build on a solid framework of shared principles and goals. Second, I believe partnerships work best when they are real partnerships. UNESCO's work needs financial support, this is true. But as importantly, we need ideas and expertise. We need innovation and creativity. And this is where the private sector can be a wellspring of great importance. This is not just about money. It is about experience and about shared commitment. Partnership should mean just that: joint work to define projects, identify targets, and monitor results. Third, partnership must be practical, driven by concrete results on the ground. At the same time, I'm convinced we must engage at the global level to help shape a more inclusive and sustainable global development agenda. And my last point, ladies and gentlemen, is about creativity. Partnerships should be created in form, and there are no models applicable to all issues, but they should also be creative in substance. We can do more, for instance, with new technologies to train teachers, to enhance learning outcomes, and to reach marginalized groups. The Broadband Commission for Digital Development that UNESCO launched in 2010 with the International Telecommunication Union is a great example in this respect. The Commission is co-chaired by President Paul Kagame of Rwanda and Carlos Lim, the Mexican industrialist, along with UNESCO and ITU. Commissioners include high-level officials from governments, international organizations, along with private sector leaders who have joined together to support global broadband rollout for sustainable development. I see this as a great example, as a laboratory for innovation, a model to consider for other areas. We can do the same in culture, in healthcare, in the sciences. In the field of education, these lessons have been included by UNESCO, together with UNICEF, the United Nations Global Compact, and the Office of the United Nations Special Envoy for Global Education, Gordon Brown, in a framework for business engagement in education that we launched together last year in 2013. And I hope my message today is quite clear. Private-public partnerships are essential parts of the soft power toolbox we need to shape a more inclusive, sustainable, and just future for all. Connecting the private sector's strength and the public sector's challenges makes sense for all societies. It also makes, I believe, good business sense. This requires closer links between the public sector and business. It calls for new platforms for cooperation and new alliances for innovation. In these days, and I would say in such ways, together, we can take forward the soft power we need for the century ahead. I thank you for your attention. And I'm ready to engage, maybe.
So you please stay at the podium.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yes.
いやどうもありがとうございました。大変印象深い話をお聞きしましたが、それではこれから Q&A のセッションに入りたいと思いますが、何かご質問、ご意見、コメントおありの方、レディーファーストとまずそれから次にその話を男性の
Thank you for a wonderful speech. My name is Irina BOKOVA, working for NTT Communications, which is a telecommunication company, a global company in Japan. I've heard many people are expecting you to be the first female Secretary General of the United Nations. I'd like to ask you, in the crisis sustainability society, in the crisis sustainable society, could the United Nations fulfill its mission for world peace? This is the first question, and I have one question. What kind of role do you think is expected to Japan to build sustainable international society?
Did you get the
Yes.
essence of the questions?
Yes.
Please, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the question about the sustainability and what role for UNESCO. And UNESCO is part of the United Nations family, of course, with a very specific mandate. I think there are many challenges in the multilateral system nowadays in the world, in the United Nations, and part of the challenges stem, as we say, on the new geopolitics that is being built. Part of them stem from the increasing challenges of the climate change, the challenges of the loss of biodiversity, the pressing, I would say, needs for this planet to, we say, we have reached the boundaries of this planet. And this is where the role of the United Nations is huge, as a broad platform of multilateral responses, because we all know that climate change and natural disasters and even today with the big migration and with the globalization, some of these challenges, they do not know physical boundaries. Climate change do not respect the geographical boundaries and political boundaries between states. And with the advancement of new technologies, we see that there is people are more interconnected as never before, but the challenges of the fragmented societies and the transition of certain societies to cope with modernity puts an enormous pressure on them. And the question about living together is becoming ever more important. And albeit conflicts more are within the countries, within these societies, they put pressure on and threat the world peace. I'm just giving the example. I was 3 days ago in Iraq, in Baghdad, where I visited, met the Prime Minister, the President. I went to the Museum of Baghdad, which is a symbol also for UNESCO's protecting of heritage, and we discussed the issue about our response to terrorism, to extremism, people that are destroying heritage in a country that is the cradle of civilization, of human civilization in the world. And this is where I see the United Nations and the concerted efforts, and including Japan, is so much in need to make this society reconcile with itself. And the Prime Minister was telling me that one of the biggest priorities for his government is how to make Iraqis live together and bridge the sectarian divide. So the role of the United Nations, including of UNESCO, I think is huge in this world of making societies more peaceful and living together. And about the role of Japan, I think Japan, I did mention it, Japan on one side knows very well what are the consequences of the war, and it is not by chance that the first UNESCO club was established here in 1947, because precisely the respect towards UNESCO in our agenda on behalf of the Japanese society is huge, to overcome the divisions, to bring together the important agenda of educating people, of bringing sustainability to the world. And I'm here, as I mentioned, for an important event where Japanese leadership is so clear. It is the Education for Sustainable Development. This was an initiative of Japan, started also, spread through UNESCO to the United Nations, where the United Nations proclaimed the Decade of Education for Sustainable Development. It was started by my predecessor, Mr. Koichiro Matsura, a friend and very respected by me, a former Director General of the organization. I took over from him 5 years ago also with the same commitment. And now we are coming here for an important global forum where we will have about 100 ministers be present and talking about the education for sustainable development, which is also very much linked to the way we produce, the way we consume, the way we relate to each other, what kind of global citizens we want to make out of our school children today. And in all of these areas, let's take the tsunami alert system that UNESCO is maintaining, coordinating, and has set in place. The role of Japan, the leadership of Japan is huge. We are working after the floods in Pakistan in 2011. We have been working with the Japanese Space Agency and with the UNESCO Center here for flood prevention in order to map the challenges in Pakistan to prevent and to create preparedness, risk preparedness and resilience to tackle such disasters, natural disasters, which affect millions of people. So once again, I think Japan took the initiative. The Intangible Heritage Convention is another very strong, I would say, initiative of Japan, promoted by Koichiro Matsura. Now it becomes a universal, respected international convention where Japan has 22 sites, 22 traditions inscribed on this important list. We hope that the new, I would say, washi paper, handmade tradition of paper will soon be inscribed, apart from all the other also traditions being already. So I cannot even enumerate all the areas of Japan's leadership with UNESCO. And I have had the opportunity just to thank the Prime Minister for this. We have great friends. We have friends, UNESCO chairs in many universities. We work with the civil society. We have a great support from the government with funds in trust, supporting some of the important activities. The biggest literacy program that UNESCO is leading in Afghanistan. I think you know very well what the challenges of such a country like Afghanistan is in terms of literacy, where out of 3 million policemen in this country, only 20% of them are literate. And Japan is helping us spread this literacy to Japan police, not to speak about the other big, I would say, part of the country and society. So I cannot enumerate everything, but I believe in any of our area of activity, be it in area of education, quality education, education for sustainable development and literacy, be it in the area of protecting the environment, the Man and Biosphere program, the biodiversity, being in the area of sciences where Japan is now a leader in the sustainability science, a new concept of the science where UNESCO is promoting strongly with Japan, be it in the area of risk preparedness and natural disasters and tsunami alert systems. In all of these areas, we have the support and the great commitment of Japan. And I mentioned a few of the examples with the private sector. I'm sure that we can forge new partnerships which will have a real impact for millions of people on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much. どうもありがとうございました。それではお待たせいたしました。金岡と申します。日本語で失礼いたします。本日は貴重なお話ありがとうございます。私はユネスコの柱の一つが教育についてお伺いしたいと思います。ユネスコが掲げる万人のための教育という理念は素晴らしいものがあると思います。一方、先ほど事務局長がおっしゃられた通り、戦争は人間の頭の中で生まれるとするならば、どのような中身を教えていくかということも非常に重要ではないかと思います。そこで気になりますのは、特に歴史の教育でございます。と申しますのも、若い子どもたちにどのような歴史を教えていくか、このことによってかえって民族的な対立や国家間の対立を助長しかねないところがあろうかと思います。
ここ日本におきましても東アジアにおいてこの歴史認識の問題が常に浮上してまいりますので、大変難しい問題かと思いますけれども、事務局長の何かお知恵があれば、その教育の中身についてお教えいただければと思います。
I believe you touch really a very important, I would say, responsibility of UNESCO in part of our work. On one side, of course, it's education for all, which aims at getting kids in school so that every child has an access to at least to the primary education. And we know that, unfortunately, still there are 58 million children in the world which are out of school. And we have launched last year, we call it the Big Push Initiative, in order to see where are the weakest points of the education systems in those countries which still have the biggest challenges. And it is not only in the poorest countries, sometimes in middle-income countries. We know that because of disparities, inequalities in societies, there is still illiteracy, there are out-of-school children, mentioning countries still which struggle with this, like India, or Nigeria, or Brazil, or Mexico, big countries, but they have still have challenges. And it is important that we accompany these countries in devising the right systems of education and target specifically some of the weakest points. At the same time, you mentioned about the textbooks, and it touches upon what kind of education we want to give the children. And we call this education for global citizenship, because it's very much linked to the concept of education for sustainable development. In fact, some of these ideas that we are putting forward today is drawing on the experience of the decade of education for sustainable development. We want young children, boys and girls, not just to write and read. It is what kind of values we educate with them. We don't want them to become extremists, as we see, unfortunately, for some of the informal schooling that they come out of this. We don't want them to become a culturally illiterate people. On the contrary, we want them to know and respect the human rights of the others, so that they're responsible to know their own history and heritage, to respect the history and heritage of the others. We speak about cultural literacy in the world. As we say, how to live together. This is one of the biggest challenges. And that is why in many parts of the world we are reviewing curricula. And we have been asked very often to review curricula in order to make these societies more open. I'm just mentioning that in some of the countries, Arab countries, after the so-called Arab Springs, we have been invited, for example, in Tunisia by the president to review the textbooks and to introduce there the notion about history, about culture, about heritage, about the others, about human rights, about democracy, because in many of these countries the knowledge about democracy is very limited and their perceptions are very different. At the same time, I think what you say is also very important. And UNESCO is encouraging a joint review of history in countries where there have been difficult moments in history. I think in Europe, it's a good example of reconciliation, including through drafting a joint history textbooks. And it is not by chance, I think, that the European Union last year received the Nobel Peace Prize. I think the reason for receiving the Nobel Peace Prize was not for economic achievements, although they're there. It was not for this economic integration. It was rather for overcoming these difficult, I would say, divisions after the Second World War. And this was an important recognition of what the European Union did, for that matter. What UNESCO is trying to do, I will give you another example from that point of view. UNESCO is very much involved. We are the only ones who are teaching the history of Holocaust. And we are teaching the history of Holocaust with a strong support by the German government and by many German partners. Because we don't want this to be repeated. We do this not to offend a country or a people. We do this in order to recognize a very difficult moment in human history where a big crime against humanity has been committed. And in order to be linking it with the genocides, with contemporary genocides that we see unfortunately in some countries. I'm mentioning, of course, the genocide in Rwanda, what is happening now in Central African Republic and in some other parts, because we see a pattern of hate which is emerging in some societies where they reject the other, where the fact that somebody is different means that you have to kill him or her in order to survive. And we don't think that we can agree with this. So I believe that textbooks and common history, common reading of history is extremely important. I come from a region, from the Balkans, with a very difficult, very recent history. A wars that took place only 20 years ago. And if I was told a year before the conflict that this was going to happen in my region, I wouldn't have believed it. But it did happen. And there were massacres, and there was also genocidal attempts in Srebrenica and some others. And what UNESCO was doing was once again bringing together these countries and talking about their common history. Because at the end of the day, they have common history, all these people. And we rebuilt a very emblematic bridge, the Bridge of Mostar, which was blown up in order to, as a symbol of the war. We rebuilt it, and we inscribed it in the World Heritage List. And then we created, for the first time, a traveling exhibition, for the first time, imagining the Balkans, where we don't concentrate on things that divide. We concentrate on the commonalities of the histories of these people, of what happens in all these people which is common to their culture, to their daily lives, to their, I would say, heritage, to their traditions. And it was for the first time a huge success with this exhibition that starts to travel in all the different countries. So UNESCO is working. If you allow me, because it's a very, very important question. Maybe I talk too long, but it's a very important question. What we are doing in the general histories, UNESCO has been taking the lead years ago, decades ago, to craft general histories of the different parts of the world. We are for the first one to craft the general history of Africa, which does not exist. We have published 6 volumes of the history of Islam. This is our recognition to this great religion, which I believe has nothing to do with the current extremist activities, but we wanted to show that this, our respect also to this religion. The last publication, the last volume, we just launched this June. It is the Foundations of Islam, to show that we respect this religion, we respect this tradition, but it is a peaceful, it does not have anything to do with what some extremists imagine. So we are really working on a very solid ground globally in order to encourage people and communities to look at what unites and not at what divides.
Thank you very much. それではご質問のある方、お二人いらっしゃいますので、じゃあとりあえず1質問だけということで、森さん。
My name is Tetsuya Mori. Only one patent attorney belonging to 経済同友会. So, as you pointed out, our world has a very, very serious, huge number of issues. Among these issues, children, protection of children. For example, I've heard in there are human traffic of the children in the village, border side of village in Thailand. How does measurement against this issue?
ちょっといや終わりましたけど。Did you get his point?
Yes, but human trafficking.
I didn't. So.
Human trafficking. I can explain to you later.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, unfortunately, there is this phenomenon. The human trafficking is I would say, one of the crimes against the children, and we are working. It's not specifically within our mandate, but we're working with the others organization like the United Nations office in Vienna that is very much working in human trafficking. I think our approach and our response is let's get kids in schools and let's keep kids in schools. Let's find a way of supporting families to keep their children, because those children that are trafficked, they're usually from a very poor rural communities. And sometimes it's because of poverty, sometimes it's because of exclusion, sometimes because it's of ignorance, sometimes because I would say of some illusionary propaganda that is there. But it is just not acceptable. We are cooperating very much, and let me mention that I'm extremely pleased with the decision of the Nobel Peace Committee, Peace Prize Committee, to give the Peace Prize to two, I would say, big campaigners for education. The one, of course, is the Malala Yousafzai, the brave, courageous Pakistani girl, and the other of a great campaigner against abuses of children, Kailash Satyarthi, a good friend also of UNESCO, and my personal friend. In fact, he came to see me a week before he was given the Nobel Peace Prize. He didn't have a clue that he was going to, neither me, that he was getting the Peace Prize. But his grassroots organization is working against child slavery, the forced labor, and the trafficking of children. For us, it's very important that there are strong partnerships between the civil society and the governments when it comes to child trafficking. There should be very solid institutions in different countries to stop this. And of course, on the side of the United Nations, we have a very clear vision, all the more that we're celebrating this year 25th anniversary of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And we are using all opportunities within this big celebration to work with governments and to strengthen all the legislative and institutional measures to curb this crime, as we said, against the children.
Thank you. じゃあ、最後の一人、
ありがとうございます。局長、大変示唆との話、どうもありがとうございました。特に冒頭にソフトパワーの重要性が強調されましたが、全くその通りだというふうに思います。それで私の質問は一つ、ホットイシューの一つなんですけれども、最近宗教集団の中で著しく過激な行動をする、そういう人たちが出てきているということに関してです。宗教の集団にいるからといって過激な行動をするというのは決して珍しくなくてですね、キリスト教徒の人もそうだし、仏教徒もそうだったんですけれども、ただ文明が高度化するに従ってそういうのは姿を消してきているように思うんですが、今その過激な行動をしているそういう宗教集団の一部のグループの人たちをもう一度我々の社会に引き入れるためにそのソフトパワーというか軍事ではない我々の力がですね、果たせる役割はどのようなものがあるかというお考えを聞かせていただきたい。
Well, I think it's really a new phenomenon that is emerging this last decades, and I believe part of it is also a reaction towards globalization, and it's a paradox. On one side, of course, as I did mention, we are more connected. We know what is happening in Africa in every single moment. We all suffer when monument is destroyed in Mali, or where the girls were abducted in Nigeria. We care about these things. We know when there is a natural disaster. And at the same time, we see more fragmented societies. So we see communities and in different, I would say, religions or ethnic or other minorities that are seeking, I believe, refuge in their own beliefs, in their own communities. I believe the reason maybe partly of this is that human beings sometimes feel more lonely in this global village, as we say, in this world which is so open and so big. Nowadays, people do not feel only that national governments and the boundaries protect them. They're exposed to the different cultures of others. They're much more, I would say, vulnerable and more fragile. We see the impact of sometimes of inequalities. We see the impact of climate change and some of the pressures on the environment. We see some of the refugees of climate change. We see poverty of climate change, which is once again making these people go into conflict or seek refuge in their own beliefs. And that is why the world is more vulnerable. You ask me what I think, our response might be. I think the general response or the general underlying is, of course, more development. I think the question about development nowadays and sustainable development stays with all its importance on the forefront of the global agenda. Where you see poverty in some of the least developed countries, and I have visited Mali with the French president after the liberation of these territories that were occupied by terrorists, or I have visited many of the Arab countries immediately after the change, where you see that there are young people who are having expectations and are not matched by the labor market, and these young people then go and are an easy prey for the extremists. I think that the notion about education is coming on the forefront of many societies and many countries, and not just education. It is about skills. It is about what kind of skills you give to these young people so that they can then start their own businesses or participate in societies. I discussed this issue even 3 days ago in Iraq that is prone to invasion from extremists and whose part of its territory also is taken by these terrorists and extremists. And still one of the first questions that the President and the Prime Minister were asking us is, come and work with us on education, on skills. Because we need young people that have skills that can go tomorrow and start their businesses or do something for their communities, for their families. On the other side, the notion about tolerance is a different, I believe it has a different concept. It was much easier before to speak about religious or ethnic or cultural tolerance because people were living not in such close contact with each other. It was a notion about I tolerate you, I know you're living somewhere else, I respect you, but you're not my neighbor. Now with these big migrations in the world, it's millions of people are migrating because of the economy, because of the globalization. With the new technologies that are around us 24 hours, it is not just about tolerating each other, it's about living together. It's about having your neighbor who is different. And this is a huge challenge that we at UNESCO feel the responsibility also of bringing to the forefront of the world, of having this cultural literacy that we speak about, knowledge about each other, of respecting their culture. I think what we're doing in the heritage, the cultural, natural heritage through our convention and the intangible, particularly the Intangible Heritage Convention, has a huge impact on having societies being more peaceful within themselves and also in a wider, I would say, statehood community. I remember 2 years ago, I was in Indonesia. We had the Intangible Heritage Committee in Bali in Indonesia, and we inscribed a dance, a traditional dance in the Aceh town, the Aceh area, which was severely hit, probably the most destroyed by the tsunami in 2005, where this is a dance very much respected by the local people. We inscribed it in our list of intangible heritage. And there was such a huge enthusiasm and such a pride, and the Minister of Culture especially thanked UNESCO because he said, only by this recognition of this tradition you make Indonesia more peaceful with itself, an incredibly diverse country. And it is not only about Indonesia. In many parts of the world, especially in multicultural societies, in multicultural, even urban environments, respecting the culture and saying to a small, I would say, community, a small culture, yes, you also matter for the world. You matter for UNESCO. We respect you. We give you this recognition. It has a huge, I would say, power of tolerance, of reconciliation, of self-respect. So we have indeed a big role, and this is why the soft power is so important nowadays. Sometimes small actions and things have a huge impact for the wider reconciliation in the world.
どうもありがとうございました。まだまだ時間があればこの Q&A セッションを続けたいところでありますが、予定の時間になりましたので、ここで、Q&A セッションは打ち切りにさせていただきたいと思いますが、ここが事務局長におかれましては、大変難しい質問に対しましても、本節丁寧に、そして、情熱を込めてお答えをいただきまして、本当に質問者のみならず、ここに集った人たちにとっても、大変貴重な機会になったというふうに思います。そういった意味で、貴重な時間を割いて、こういった場を設定していただきました事務局長のご厚意に、改めて感謝をして、拍手で感謝の意を表したいと思いますので、よろしくお願いいたします。Thank you very much.